Manipulation is hardest to spot when it does not feel like force. It feels like guilt, confusion, a deadline, a favor you somehow owe, a conversation that began with their behavior and ends with you apologizing. There is no official master list, and many labels overlap. Most tactics still travel through a few routes. They distort reality or relationships, exploit commitment and reciprocity, or shape the decision environment with urgency, comparison, authority, or limited options. And if manipulation sits with threats, monitoring, coercive control, or abuse, safety and outside support matter more than the perfect comeback. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most overused words online, so let's narrow it down. A disagreement is not automatically gaslighting. Someone remembering an argument differently is not automatically gaslighting either. The more serious pattern is repeated manipulation that pushes you to distrust your own perception, memory, or judgment. You raise a specific event. The answer is not just, "I remember it differently." It becomes, "That never happened." You always invent things. Everyone knows you're too sensitive. Over time, the argument shifts away from what happened and toward whether you are capable of knowing what happened at all. That is why one useful defense is often not a more passionate argument. Externalize what you can. Keep messages, dates, agreements, or notes when the situation matters and when doing so is safe. Check your memory with trustworthy people who were actually present, and a plain sentence may help. "We disagree about the event. I'm not agreeing that my ability to perceive reality is the issue." You do not have to win a courtroom case inside every conversation. You need enough stable ground to think. Guilt tripping. Guilt can be useful. If you hurt someone, guilt may push you to repair something. Guilt tripping is different. It uses guilt as leverage to obtain compliance. You say no to a request. Instead of discussing the request, the person turns your refusal into evidence about your character. "After everything I've done for you, I guess I know how little I matter. A good daughter would come." The pressure works because most people do not want to feel selfish, disloyal, or cruel. The trick is that two separate questions get fused together. "Do I care about you?" and "Will I do this specific thing?" Pull them apart. "I care about you," and my answer is still no. Or, "I'm willing to discuss the request, but not prove my love by agreeing to it." Then stop defending your entire personality. The more you try to prove you are a good person, the easier it becomes for the conversation to stay on your moral worth instead of the actual decision. Feeling guilty does not automatically mean the boundary was wrong. DARVO. You confront someone about harm and the conversation performs a full emergency evacuation. First comes denial, then an attack on your credibility. Then the roles flip, and suddenly they are the injured party because you brought the issue up. That pattern is known as DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It does not mean every defensive person is using a deliberate script, but the pattern matters because it can pull attention away from the original behavior. You begin with, "Why did you share that private message?" 20 minutes later, you are apologizing for being suspicious, cruel, dramatic, and apparently responsible for ruining the evening. A useful response is almost boring. Keep returning to the original question. We can discuss your complaints separately. Right now, I'm asking why you shared the message. Writing down the issue before a difficult conversation can help if you tend to get pulled off course. And notice when an attack on you is being used as a substitute for an answer. Two people can both have complaints. That does not erase the first one. Moving the goalposts. You meet the condition. Somehow the condition changes. "If you showed me more evidence, I'd believe you." You show it. Now the evidence is not official enough. You get the official version. Now the problem is your tone. You fix the tone. Now the problem is that you cared too much about proving it. That is moving the goalposts, changing the standard after the original standard has been met. Often so, success stays permanently out of reach. It works because people are surprisingly willing to keep playing when they think one more effort will finally settle the matter. The next document, the next apology, the next achievement. Define the finish line early. What specific evidence would resolve this? What exactly would count as completed? If the standard changes, name the change instead of automatically chasing it. That is a new requirement. The original requirement was X. Sometimes, new information genuinely should change a standard. Fine. Then the reason should be explainable. If the standard changes only after you meet it, Stop treating the new standard as the original agreement. The next tactics are less about winning one argument and more about shaping the emotional climate around a relationship. Love bombing. Love bombing is a popular label, not a diagnosis, and the research on the term itself is still limited, so intensity alone is not proof of manipulation. Some people are simply enthusiastic. Some cultures are expressive. Some new relationships move quickly and turn out fine. The warning sign is intensity joined to pressure or control. Constant messages, huge promises after very little time, grand gifts that create obligation. You are the only person who has ever understood me before they know what you order for lunch. Then discomfort when you ask for space, keep your normal friendships, or refuse to match the speed. Do not become suspicious of affection. Protect pace instead. Keep your routines. Keep outside relationships. Make important decisions at the speed of evidence, not the speed of emotion. Ask whether warmth survives a reasonable boundary. Healthy affection may be disappointed by not yet. Manipulative intensity often treats not yet as betrayal. The real test is not how extraordinary someone makes you feel when you agree. It is how they behave when you remain a separate person. Intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes the hook is not constant kindness. It is unpredictability. Warm for 3 days, cold for 2, an apology, a perfect weekend, then contempt, then another burst of affection just as you are ready to leave. Behavioral psychology has long shown that rewards do not have to arrive every time to maintain behavior. In relationships, intermittent reinforcement is sometimes used as a lens for why unpredictable warmth may keep attention fixed on the next good moment. It is only a lens. Inconsistency is not automatically deliberate, and relationships are more complicated than laboratory schedules. Judge the relationship by the full timeline, not only its emotional peaks. Write down what happens across weeks. Ask, what is normal here, rather than what was the best day. Pay particular attention when warmth repeatedly returns after harm or just as you are ready to leave. Punitive silence. Not every silence is manipulation. Some people need time to calm down. Some freeze during conflict. A healthy timeout can sound like, I'm overwhelmed, I need an hour, I will come back at 8. Punitive silence is different. Communication is withdrawn to punish, frighten, or force pursuit. No clear return, no practical communication, just a social door slammed shut until you apologize, surrender, or guess the correct behavior. This can be powerful because being ignored creates uncertainty. People often start bargaining with themselves just to restore contact. Do not respond to the uncertainty with a growing series of apologies for a problem nobody will name. One calm message may be enough. I'm available to talk when we can communicate directly. I won't keep guessing. Then, return to your own routine and support system. If silence is part of a broader pattern of coercion or abuse, the issue is bigger than communication style. Safety and outside support matter more than finding the perfect sentence. A healthy timeout includes a plan to return. Punitive silence usually does not. Triangulation. A disagreement has 2 people in it. Then a mysterious crowd appears. My friends all think you're impossible. Even your sister agrees with me. Everyone at work says you're the problem. Sometimes the third person is real. Sometimes their opinion is exaggerated. Sometimes 2 people are quietly being told different stories, so they compete for approval. Triangulation is a broad descriptive label for pulling a third party into a 2-person dynamic in a way that creates pressure, rivalry, jealousy, or confusion. It is not a clinical diagnosis, and involving another person is not automatically manipulative. Mediation can be healthy. Secretly manufacturing a jury is different. When it is safe and appropriate, verify the claim instead of arguing with an invisible group. Did they actually say that? Sometimes speaking to the person yourself is useful. Sometimes it is not possible or safe, so do not force it. You can still refuse the setup, I'm not going to argue against an unnamed group. If people are kept from comparing notes, watch for information control. Treat secondhand claims as unverified until you have a reason to trust them. Isolation and coercive control. Some manipulation does not target one decision. It targets the environment around every decision. A partner mocks your friends until seeing them becomes exhausting. A group says outsiders are dangerous. A boss discourages employees from comparing pay. Someone monitors messages, creates conflicts with your support system, or insists that only they truly understand what is happening. In severe cases, this can be part of coercive control, a broader pattern of restricting autonomy through isolation, monitoring, threats, rules, or domination. The mechanism is brutally practical. Independent relationships provide alternative information. They let you reality check. Remove those connections, and one person's version of events becomes harder to challenge. The response is not always, confront them harder. In controlling or abusive situations, confrontation can increase risk. Preserve safe contact with trusted people, keep access to important information and documents where appropriate. Seek specialized support if you feel monitored, threatened, or trapped, and take sudden demands to abandon your entire support system seriously. A person who needs to become your only source of reality is asking for more than closeness. That first family of tactics works mainly by destabilizing reality, relationships, or access to support. The next group is quieter. It works through commitment. Once you have moved one step, the next step can start feeling easier to accept. Foot in the door. Foot in the door is the small yes sequence. First comes a request that is easy to accept. Later comes a larger related request. Classic compliance research has studied this pattern for decades. Can you help for 5 minutes? Becomes an afternoon. Just create an account becomes a subscription. Can I borrow a small amount? Becomes a much larger financial ask. The effect is not magic, and it does not work every time, but prior commitment can make a later request feel more consistent with what you have already done, or with the kind of person you now see yourself as being. The pause has to happen when the request grows. Ask, would I agree to this larger request if it appeared first? That question removes the emotional fog created by the first yes. You can help once without becoming the permanent help department. The second request still deserves its own answer. Door in the face. The door in the face technique runs the sequence the other way. First comes a request so large you are likely to refuse. Then comes the smaller request that was often the real target. Can you volunteer every weekend for 6 months? No. Okay, could you at least help this Saturday? Suddenly Saturday feels reasonable, partly because the second request is smaller by comparison and may feel like a concession. Classic research found that this kind of sequence can increase compliance under some conditions. The exact reasons are not one neat law. Reciprocal concession is one important explanation. The comparison is the trap. The better question is not, is this smaller than the first request? It is, do I actually want to do this? Do I want to give up Saturday? Do I have the time? Would I have said yes if the huge request had never happened? The first demand should not quietly become your baseline. Sometimes the smaller request is still a request you do not want. Lowballing. You agree while the deal looks attractive. Then, after commitment, the cost changes. That is lowballing. A price loses the promised discount. A job reveals a major condition after you have emotionally committed. A plan that sounded easy develops extra fees, extra work, or a conveniently forgotten obligation. The psychological pressure comes from commitment. Once you have pictured the purchase, announced the decision, spent time or started the process, walking away feels like losing progress. Classic compliance research has studied this commitment then cost pattern. When the terms change, the old yes has expired. Treat the new deal as a new decision. Literally say, that was not the deal I agreed to. I'm evaluating this from zero. Ask for final terms in writing before paying, signing, traveling, or making an irreversible commitment. And watch the sentence. You've already come this far. Distance traveled is not evidence that the new deal is good. If the material terms changed, your answer is allowed to change too. Bait and switch. Lowballing changes the cost after commitment. Bait and switch changes the thing. The attractive option gets your attention. The cheap apartment, the available product, the easy plan, the simple job. Then that option mysteriously disappears, and a worse or more expensive substitute is waiting. Not every unavailable product is a conspiracy. Stock runs out. Plans change. The manipulation is in using an attractive offer as bait without a genuine intention or reasonable ability to provide what drew you in. Preserve the original question. Would I want this substitute if I had never seen the bait? Do not let time already spent shopping, traveling, interviewing, or negotiating become a reason to accept a different deal. Ask what exactly changed. Compare alternatives outside the seller's frame. Leave when the replacement does not stand on its own. The bait creates momentum. The substitute still has to stand on its own. So far, the pressure has come from relationships or from commitments already made. The next group changes the decision environment before you choose. It shapes what feels urgent, normal, credible, or even available. Scarcity and urgency. Only 2 left. Offer ends in 9 minutes. Decide tonight. Everyone else is interested. Scarcity can affect perceived value, and urgency reduces the time available for comparison. That does not make every deadline manipulative. Real tickets sell out, real applications close, real emergencies exist. The problem is manufactured pressure. A timer that resets, a fake shortage, or a deadline whose main purpose is to prevent thought. Slow the moment down with 2 questions. Is the scarcity verifiable, and what happens if I do nothing today? When practical, save changing claims. Check another source, and give yourself whatever decision time the situation genuinely allows. For large purchases or commitments, unexplained urgency is a reason to become more cautious, not less. The point is not that every fast decision is bad, it is that pressure can make speed feel mandatory when it is not. Reciprocity pressure. Someone gives you something. Now the air changes. A favor, a gift, a free sample, an introduction. None of those are bad. Reciprocity is a normal social norm. Mutual help is part of how relationships work. Manipulation begins when an unsolicited benefit is turned into a hidden invoice. I bought you dinner, so you owe me. I helped you once, so you cannot refuse this. The original gift is retroactively converted into a contract whose terms you never saw. The clean split is gratitude on one side, choice on the other. Thank you for what you did. I'm still deciding this request on its own. If a gift feels strategically expensive, you can decline it, return it, or clarify expectations early. Repayment should be proportionate and freely chosen. You can appreciate generosity without turning every favor into an open-ended obligation. Social proof and conformity. People look to other people for information, especially when a situation is uncertain. 2 pressures can blend together here. One is informational. Maybe the crowd knows something you do not. The other is social. Maybe disagreeing will cost you approval, comfort, or belonging. Classic conformity research showed that group pressure can influence even simple judgments. Modern platforms add ratings, likes, testimonials, follower counts, and sometimes fake consensus. The manipulation is not social information itself. Reviews can be useful. The problem is manufactured or strategically presented consensus used to replace your own evaluation. So check the crowd before you obey it. Ask people separately before they hear the group answer. Read a mix of reviews, not only the highlighted ones. Check whether everyone means 3 people in the same circle, and notice when disagreement is treated as proof of stupidity or disloyalty. A crowd can contain useful information. It can also amplify a mistake, especially when nobody is checking independently. Authority pressure. A uniform title, confident voice, expensive office, or technical vocabulary can change how a request feels. Authority is sometimes legitimate. Surgeons really do know more about surgery than random strangers. The problem is authority used outside its actual domain, or status cues used to shut down questions. Trust me, I'm the expert. Which expert? In what field? Based on what evidence? Are they advising or demanding obedience? The important split is between the credential and the claim. Is this person real? Is this their actual field? Are they explaining evidence or using status to end the conversation? When the stakes are high, a second opinion is not disrespect. It is part of taking the decision seriously. Real expertise can usually explain what is known, what is uncertain, and why a recommendation follows. Expertise matters. The claim still has to fit the expert's actual field and the evidence available. Anchoring. The first number in a conversation can pull later judgment toward it, even when the number is not a good estimate. That is anchoring. A seller shows the absurd original price before the discount. A negotiator starts with an extreme figure. Someone says, most people donate 100 before asking what you want to give. The first value becomes a reference point. The later number may feel cheap, generous, or reasonable mainly because of what came first. One way to reduce the pull is to build an independent reference point before entering the room. Research typical prices. Decide your budget. Write down your acceptable range. For salary, purchases, deadlines, or estimates, ask what the number should be based on rather than how far it is from the first number you heard. When the first number is obviously strategic, return to outside information. Half the original price tells you almost nothing if the original price was theater. The framing effect. The same basic information can produce different reactions depending on how it is presented. A treatment has a survival rate. The same treatment has a mortality rate. A product is 90% fat-free or 10% fat. The facts may be mathematically equivalent, while the emotional emphasis changes. This is the framing effect. Framing is unavoidable. Every explanation highlights something. Manipulation appears when a frame hides relevant alternatives or uses wording to steer you while pretending the presentation is neutral. Translate the frame. Turn gains into losses and losses into gains. Convert percentages into frequencies when useful. Ask what information the sentence leaves outside the frame. If someone says, "You have a 90% chance of success," ask, "So roughly a 10% chance of failure?" Not because the negative version is more truthful, but because seeing both versions reduces the power of either one. The useful move is translation. Restate the same choice in another mathematically equivalent way and see whether your judgment changes. The false dilemma. Finally, one of the oldest pressure moves. Pretend there are only two options. You're either with me or against me. Agree now or admit you do not care. Take this deal or lose everything. A false dilemma compresses a messy situation into two choices, usually with one choice made morally, socially, or emotionally unbearable. The first crack in a false dilemma is usually a third sentence. Those are not the only two possibilities. Then look for another route. Delay, negotiate, partially agree, seek more information, refuse the premise, ask what would happen under a mixed solution. This matters because manipulation often works by shrinking perceived choice before it ever tries to control the choice itself. Sometimes the pressure weakens as soon as the two-option story stops looking complete. And that is the thread running through all of these techniques. Manipulation rarely removes your ability to choose. More often, it distorts the conditions around choice. It makes one memory feel unreliable, one refusal feel cruel, one deadline feel fatal, one crowd feel unanimous, one commitment feel impossible to reverse. The counter is not becoming suspicious of everyone. It is creating enough distance to evaluate what is happening, separate the request from the guilt, the claim from the title, the deal from the sunk time, the current pattern from the best day. You do not need to identify every tactic perfectly in real time. Sometimes the most protective question is much simpler. If I had more time, more information, and no fear of disappointing this person, would I still choose this?